Okay. All right. I'm going to let people put up the last of the chairs here, and then we're going to get started. I want to start today by inviting Elder Taz up to give a land acknowledgement.
Dansa, Taz Nisikasun, Utanamiganyan. I'd like to say you are now sitting on not only Treaty 6 territory, but you're sitting on the traditional territory of the Cree Nation. As an elder in the community, I am responsible to make sure that my people are aware of what's going on. So that's one of the reasons I'm sitting here, to really get the gist of how this affects the Native people across the land. Because from what I'm reading and what I'm understanding is Danielle Smith is attempting to obtain pensions that belong to other people and to make decisions without getting a voice from the people. And she needs to get a voice from the people, the Indigenous people across the land who supplied workers to the various companies in this province. How is she going to be distributing that CPP to those people across the land who sent people from the East Coast and from other regions of Canada? I think she needs to be aware that there is treaties, and under the treaty, we are a sovereign people, and the treaty is not limited to reservations, but encompasses the cities and other jurisdictions within the province. There needs to be an involvement of Indigenous sovereignty at the table of negotiations that she's putting on. She cannot be doing what she's doing without taking into consideration the many Indigenous people that have contributed to the CPP, the future generations who will be accessing that CPP from across the land. With that, I'd like to say, Kanaskum Tanawa Utakapidohtiyan, and Tawau, I welcome you all to the Cree Nation territory and Treaty 6, something every Canadian has agreed to when they signed their citizenship paper to be part of the treaty. Iksa.
Okay, so this is a press conference, and you generally don't have activities doing this, but we're going to do one. We're all going to reach into our pockets. We're going to take these phones out, and we are going to set them to vibrate. Because Lord knows, no one wants to be that person during a speech, but it's twice as bad as when your phone goes off during a press conference. So let's all get our phones out and set them to vibrate, as I myself am doing now. So give you guys a second to do that. I'm going to talk about a little bit what's going to happen today now. This is a press conference for the benefit of these folks and folks watching across the province. What's going to happen is Gil is going to come out here and talk about this important report that we're launching today. These reporters are going to have questions for Gil, and we're going to take those questions first because these guys all have deadlines. They're workers like you and I, and they've got to get this stuff on the news. But then we're going to take your questions. And you see right there, next to Elder Taz, there is a microphone. That is there for you to line up at and then ask Gil your questions about the CPP, about the report, and about what's going to happen to pensions in this province. So, having said all that, I think it's time we got started. I'd like to welcome the President of the Alberta Federation of Labour, Gil McGowan.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Elder Taz, and thank you especially to everyone who's joined us today for the release of this important report. Almost exactly 2 months ago, Premier Danielle Smith officially launched her campaign to convince Albertans to leave the Canada Pension Plan. Since that time, Albertans have heard from academics and economists who say that the government's numbers don't add up. We've heard from business leaders who say the government's plan could drive away investment and discourage workers from moving to our province. We've heard from the official opposition who say that the government is playing politics with the retirement security of Albertans. And we've even heard from other provinces, most notably the Ontario Finance Minister, who wrote a scathing letter to Premier Smith saying she was putting the retirement security of all Canadians at risk. All of these groups have an interest in keeping CPP whole, but no one has a bigger stake in the outcome of this debate than Alberta workers. For workers, CPP is the cornerstone of their retirement security. They pay for it, they plan around it, and they count on it. As Alberta's largest worker advocacy group, we at the Alberta Federation of Labour have an obligation to analyze big issues that have the potential to impact Alberta workers, and to communicate that analysis to them so they can stand up and fight back if necessary. This is a responsibility that we at the Alberta Federation of Labour take very seriously. And there are a few issues that are of bigger concern to workers than retirement security. So for the past 8 weeks, we've been digging into the government proposal, trying to understand its components and to see the truth beyond the spin. To help us in this task, our team looked at everything that's been published by Alberta academics. We looked at what pension experts from around the province and across the country are saying, and we enlisted the help of one of Canada's preeminent pension law experts, Murray Gold. Murray can justifiably be called a pension guru. He's a senior partner with Koski Minsky and has a nationally recognized pension and employee benefit practice. He advises governments on pension policy. He supports the governing boards of public and private sector pension plans across Canada. He works with employee groups and employers. There are very few people in this country who know as much about pensions as Murray does. And he helped us write the report that we are releasing today. So, what did we conclude in that report? Well, the title of the report pretty much sums up what we think of the Alberta government's pension plan. Big risks, no rewards. Given that risks are what you're trying to limit with any pension plan, that's a pretty damning assessment. For our purposes this morning, I'm going to summarize the main claims that are being made by the Alberta government to justify their proposal to pull out all of Alberta workers and all retirees out of CPP. Then I'm going to summarize how our report responds to each of those claims. So let's start with the rationale provided by the government for leaving CPP. They say Alberta has been, quote, over-contributing to CPP to the tune of $5 billion a year and $60 billion since the plan was set up in 1965. They want Albertans to feel indignant about this purported injustice. But here's the thing. Provinces don't contribute to CPP. Individual workers and individual employers do. And individual workers pay exactly the same premiums into CPP, and they get exactly the same benefits out wherever they live in Canada, whether that happens to be in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, Castlegar, British Columbia, or Calgary, Alberta. Put simply, the argument that Albertans are over-contributing to CPP is a myth. It's a carefully constructed fiction designed to make Albertans angry and more receptive to the radical idea of leaving a big, stable pension plan, the CPP, for a smaller, riskier one. The only two reasons that some provinces are getting more aggregate benefits than Alberta at this particular moment in time is because Alberta has a younger population, meaning that most Albertans have not yet reached the age where they would be drawing benefits, and because many people who worked in Alberta have retired in other provinces. Both of these things make it look like there's an imbalance, but there isn't. It's an accounting trick that should be beneath any government or politician who has been elected to serve the public interest. How can we trust a government that knowingly stoops to using this kind of deceptive marketing? That leads to the second major claim being made by the Smith government, namely that Alberta would be entitled to walk away from CPP with 53% of the money that's currently saved in the CPP fund. They say there's a formula in the CPP Act that lays it all out, and that calculating Alberta's entitlement is, to borrow a phrase from our Premier, just math. But as we show in our report, it's not just math. Even LifeWorks, the consultants used by the Alberta government themselves, admit that the formula in the CPP Act doesn't make any sense. That's why they cooked up their own self-described alternative formula, a formula that's never been used by anyone before and that's not accepted or supported by any experts. What the Alberta government doesn't mention is that CPP is jointly run by the federal government and all the provinces minus Quebec. There is absolutely no way that other provinces will allow a province with 12% of the population and 16% of contributions to walk away with 53% of the fund. If Albertans vote to secede from CPP, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that they don't, but if they do, it would set off a very lengthy round of negotiations and legal wrangling. There would be nothing automatic about it. The final transfer amount would be settled upon, is unclear, but what is clear is that it would be dramatically smaller than the $334 billion touted by the Alberta government in their ad campaigns. If it was a third of that amount, which, by the way, is what University of Calgary economist Trevor Toom has suggested, all of the purported benefits of leaving CPP would evaporate. Premiums would not be lower, benefits would not be higher, and there would be no money to pay for one-time $5,000 or $10,000 retirement bonuses that have been floated by the Alberta government in their ads and on their website. That leads to the third claim being made by the Alberta government, namely that workers and employers would save exactly $1,425 each year if Albertans voted to leave CPP. That number has been repeated ad nauseum by the government and treated as a fact. But here's the problem. All the promises that the Alberta government is making, including the $1,425 promise and the promise to give retirees $5,000 or $10,000 retirement bonuses, they all hinge on the $334 billion transfer amount, which, as we've seen, is not a realistic number. As we say in our report, it's a case of one fantasy number being built on the foundation of another fantasy number. The fact that the Premier and her ministers are using this unrealistic number to sell a big change to the cornerstone of retirement security for all Albertans should give everyone in this province pause. Sadly, as we show in our report, misleading numbers aren't the only problem with the Alberta government's pension proposal. They also make many other misleading statements. For example, in the glossy leaflet that the government mailed to every Alberta household, they say, and I quote, they would work with partners to develop agreements to allow Albertans to move throughout Canada without impacting their pension benefits. They leave the impression, a deliberate impression, that Alberta would easily and as a matter of course get other provinces to agree to portability agreements similar to those enjoyed by the Quebec pension plan. But once again, as a reminder, CPP is a collective run by the federal government and all the other provinces. A portability agreement that would allow Albertans to live and work in other provinces would have to be negotiated. Given that Alberta's secession from the CPP would mean higher premiums for other provinces, those provinces might not be in the mood to simply cut Alberta the same deal as Quebec. Actions have consequences, and impediments to portability might be one of the consequences of the Alberta government's scheme. Another area where Premier Smith and her colleagues are misleading Albertans is on the subject of demographics. How many of you have heard the Premier and her Minister of Finance say that an Alberta pension plan will always be cheaper than CPP because Alberta will always have a younger population? How many of you have heard that? But here's the thing. Quebec once had a younger population than the rest of the country. That was one of the reasons they chose to set up their own plan instead of joining CPP. And how did that work out? Obviously, Quebec didn't continue to have a younger population, and they were forced to increase pension premiums as a result. There is every reason to believe that the same thing will happen to Alberta. In fact, on page 4 of the LifeWorks report, the government's own consultants admit that it's happening already. They say our demographics are already converging with the rest of the country, and that in the not too distant future, the average age of our population will be no younger than the populations in other provinces. When that happens, we won't be able to keep premiums low. We don't hear about that, though. All we get are sales slogans and best-case scenarios. The Alberta government is also not being straight with Albertans about other potential downsides of going it alone. For example, they're not being candid with us about what an Alberta pension plan might look like 5, 10, or 20 years after pulling out of CPP. They point to provisions in the CPP Act that stipulate that any new plan would have to have similar benefits to CPP. But what they don't say is that this rule only applies at the time of separation. As I've said, CPP is jointly run by the federal government and the provinces. What that means is that any change to CPP premiums or benefits needs to be approved by multiple governments. In fact, changes to CPP have to be approved by 2/3 of all provinces with 2/3 of the population. That's a higher bar than the formula used to amend the Canadian Constitution. And the bar is set that high by design to make it exceedingly difficult for politicians to mess around with the retirement savings of Canadian workers. But with an Alberta pension plan, there would be only one government, the Alberta government, making all the decisions with no checks or balances. There would be no 2/3 rule. There would be nothing to stop future Alberta governments from making big changes that deviate, perhaps substantially, from CPP's original design. For example, CPP is currently fully indexed for inflation, which is a very important feature, especially during inflationary times like the ones we're currently living through. Would a standalone Alberta plan maintain full indexation? Not necessarily. The Alberta government's pensions for public sector workers are currently only 60% adjusted for inflation. They could do the same for an APP. There would be no one to stop them. Similarly, the CPP currently provides robust disability benefits. And CPP is also in the midst of increasing retirement benefits by 50% for all Canadian workers. Would an Alberta pension plan keep the same level of disability benefits? Would it keep the benefit increases that are currently being phased into CPP? Once again, they wouldn't have to. They could water down the benefits and there would be no one to stop them. Even more troubling, before she was elected, Premier Danielle Smith publicly mused about raising the retirement age to 70. She has also mused on many occasions about using money in an Alberta pension plan to prop up companies in the oil and gas sector who are having trouble getting cash from global capital markets. Would Albertans have to work until 70 before being eligible to collect retirement benefits? Would their pension savings be used to prop up risky business ventures with low or negative investment returns? None of this would be likely with CPP because other provinces wouldn't let it happen, but with a plan run by one government with no checks and balances, any or all of these things could happen. Do we really want to give Danielle Smith's government, or any future Alberta government, that kind of exclusive power over our retirement savings? The final point I want to highlight from our report has to do with investment performance. Put simply, when it comes to investing, bigger is always better. Over the past decade, CPP has earned returns of 10.9% per year on average. That compares to average returns of 7.9% per year by AIMCO, the Alberta government-owned investment manager that would likely be tapped to run investments for an Alberta pension plan. That difference of 2.7% each year, year on year, is huge. And as we point out in our report, it's enough to wipe out any demographic advantage related to Alberta's younger population. There are three old adages that we at the AFL think should be front and center in the mind of all Albertans as we collectively consider the radical proposal from the Smith government to secede from the Canada Pension Plan. First, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Second, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And third, you often don't appreciate how good something is until it's gone. We think all three adages apply to our current situation. The Alberta government's promises are too good to be true. In fact, it's clear that what we're experiencing is a deliberate campaign of deception and misinformation. Also, CPP is not broken. In fact, it's one of the strongest, most reliable pension plans in the world. And if we left, we would certainly regret it. Why? Because CPP is literally a national treasure. How good is it? Well, the New York-based advisory group Global SWF recently reviewed the 10-year performance of the world's largest public pension fund managers and sovereign wealth funds. This included Norway's sovereign wealth fund, those run by the wealthy petrostates in the Persian Gulf, and major US, European, and Canadian public pension funds. They concluded that CPP delivered the highest returns of any public pension fund manager on the planet over the past 10 years. Put simply, CPP is rock solid and leading the pack globally. As long as we don't screw it up, it will be there for generations of Canadians who are not even born yet. The same cannot be said for a smaller, riskier Alberta plan. Every pension expert in the world acknowledges that size matters when it comes to pensions. That's true for investment returns and for risk pooling, which is key to the long-term security of any pension plan. We know that CPP can do the job, but the same could not be said for a plan run by any single province, including Alberta. Again, there's an old adage, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. With the APP, we don't even know if there will be any birds in the bush. I'd like to conclude this morning by restating two of the major conclusions from our report. First, despite claims made by the Alberta government to the contrary, it is not a given that leaving the Canada Pension Plan would lead to lower contribution rates for Albertans or higher benefits. In fact, we think there's every reason to believe that the reverse would be true. The only thing that would be guaranteed with the Alberta government's proposal is higher risk for Albertans, which is the last thing that anyone wants when they're talking about retirement savings. Second, the Alberta government's plan needs to be rejected because it politicizes pensions. CPP investments are well insulated from political interference, but Premier Smith has mused often and openly about viewing a standalone Alberta pension as, and these are her own words, as a pot of money that can and should be used to support pet projects of the government. A scary prospect when we're talking about the retirement savings of millions. It cannot be stated strongly enough that the money saved by Alberta workers through CPP belongs to the workers who saved it, not to Danielle Smith or any other politician. This money has been set aside to provide stable retirement incomes for Albertans and other Canadians, not to act as a political slush fund. Political interference in an Alberta pension plan would reduce future investment returns and create significant deficits in that plan that could lead to future benefit reductions or contribution increases. We simply can't allow that to happen. All of this leaves us with a series of questions for our fellow Albertans. The Alberta government is asking us to trust them. But how can we trust a group that promised during the recent election campaign that they wouldn't touch CPP, but did just that just 3 months later? How can we trust a group that presents highly questionable numbers as facts? And how can we trust a group that seems to have an agenda for how to use our retirement savings that is not solely focused on providing income for retirees? With this report, we in the Alberta Labour Movement have settled on our answers to those questions. We don't trust this government with our pensions, and we don't think our fellow Albertans should trust them either. With that in mind, in the coming days, we will be working hard to share this report and its conclusions with other Albertans. We're also launching a website today, don'triskit.ca, and we'll be soon launching an ad campaign aimed at countering the tidal wave of misinformation and deceptive marketing that has been deployed by the government at taxpayer expense for the past 2 months. So stay tuned. This report is only the first step in our campaign to protect the interests of Alberta workers by defeating the Alberta government's risky, reckless, and irresponsible plan to secede from the Canada Pension Plan. There's a lot more to come, and we'll be calling on all of you and all other Albertans to help join the fight to protect their own retirement security. And at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions. We'll take questions first from the media, if they have them, and then we'll open the mic to members of the public who have joined us. And feel free to ask questions or even make statements. We want to hear what you have to say about this pension plan proposal. I gave you guys a lot. If you.
I'll go first. Have you had any face-to-face time with the UCP to ask them any questions that you and the AFL have, or are you guys subject to phone town halls that they're putting up for all of us?
Yeah. I think most Albertans would be shocked to find out that our current government has not met with the largest worker advocacy group in the province. It's not, for dint of us trying. We've asked for meetings with the Premier. We've asked for meetings with the Finance Minister. We would ask for a meeting with the Labour Minister if they had one, but they don't. But despite our requests, despite our letters, we have not been granted a meeting, even though as an organization we represent 175,000 working Albertans. That's a concern. So, so I mean, some of our members have tried to participate in the online consultations. Some of them got through, some of them not. But I want to make it really clear. From our perspective, this government is not serious about consulting Albertans about this radical proposal to withdraw all Alberta workers and all Alberta retirees from the Canada Pension Plan. They call what they're doing a consultation, but I think it's become really clear to anyone who's paying attention that this is not a consultation, it's a high-pressure sales job. And we've seen that at the telephone town halls where the so-called supposedly objective panel, instead of listening to Albertans, has engaged them in debate. They're not soliciting opinion. They're trying to tell Albertans how to think, and that's been our experience with this government, and that's troubling on every issue, but it's particularly troubling when it comes to this radical proposal to withdraw all Alberta workers and all Alberta retirees from the Canada Pension Plan. Because the Canada Pension Plan is secure, it's stable, it's the cornerstone of retirement security for all Albertans, and they want us to jump into something that's smaller, less stable, and more risky. The fact that they're not really willing to seriously consider the opinions of Albertans on such an important issue speaks volumes about who they are as a government and what they really are trying to do. They're not trying to, improve retirement security. They're trying to sell us on a plan that will actually hurt Albertans, and frankly, Albertans should be really troubled by that.
What are you hearing from your members about the
Well, it doesn't matter who you talk to in the workforce, whether they're public sector workers or private sector workers, unionized or non-unionized. After wages, the biggest concern for any worker is probably retirement security. And, so when a government makes a proposal that has the potential to dramatically undermine that retirement security, people get nervous. They get anxious, and if they don't get the kind of information that they need to understand the proposal, they get angry. And that's what's happening in Alberta right now. The polls show that. Our experience with our own members in both the public and private sector show that. Working Albertans are worried. They're worried about this proposal. They don't understand it, and the more they learn about it, the less they like it. So, if Alberta workers were to be polled today, I think it would be an overwhelmingly no vote against what the government is proposing.
My question: what are your thoughts on, I guess, to let members of the public have a say in a situation would be like a referendum?
Well, I mean, they've already promised a referendum, but I think it's important. One of the things that I think it's important to say is that this is a question that no Albertans were asking. This is an issue. This is a problem that no one wanted to solve. People were happy with the Canada Pension Plan. No one was, outside of the UCP cabinet themselves, were raising concerns. So, from my perspective, from our perspective at the Alberta Federation of Labour, what's happening in Alberta fits the definition of snake oil cells, right? So when you think of snake oil salesman, you think of someone who is trying to sell a product that no one was asking for, a product that doesn't really solve a problem, a product that actually might make a situation worse. That's the definition of snake oil. And when you see what's being proposed by this government, that's exactly what's happening. They're trying to sell something that people were never asking for, to solve a problem that no one was complaining about, and offering a cure that actually not only won't provide any help, but will actually make things worse. So by that definition, what we're dealing with is snake oil salesmen, and that definition, from our perspective, is exactly what's happening with this UCP proposal to pull all Alberta workers and retirees out of Canada, out of the Canada Pension Plan. Sure. Nothing in our report surprised. Actually, let me say this. One of the most significant things about our report, which was prepared by workers for workers, is that it came to many of the same conclusions. In fact, I would argue all of the same conclusions that are being reached by other groups and other individuals around this province. So, for example, the business community has expressed concern about the plan, the proposal to pull Alberta out of CPP, because they're worried that it would hurt the economy by discouraging people from moving to Alberta to work, and it might make it harder for them to get investment in our province. So the business community is against it. Academics and economists say the numbers don't add up. We've got academics, we've got business, and now we have labor. We're all saying the same thing. I think it speaks volumes that so many groups from diverse backgrounds from across the province are coming to the same conclusion, and that conclusion is that this plan by the Alberta government to pull all Alberta workers and retirees out of the Canada Pension Plan is risky, it's irresponsible, and it's radical. Right? This is not just tweaking around the edges. This is a proposal that has the potential to dramatically undermine the retirement security of Albertans, not just for a little while, but for years, maybe even generations to come. So this is a risky, irresponsible, radical proposal. That's the same conclusion that the business community is coming to, the same conclusion that economists are coming to, and now we in the labor movement, on behalf of workers, are coming to the same conclusion. When you have so many groups coming to the same conclusion, and only the government trying to defend this indefensible proposal, I think that tells you that they're on the wrong side, and the vast majority of Albertans, including the workers that we represent, we're onto something, and the government should listen.
All right. With that, we're happy to take comments and questions from you. We have a microphone waiting for you right here. All you need to do is walk up to it.
Okay. Questions, comments?
There's plenty of people in the room. Yeah, you need to come to the mic just for the media.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the report, and look forward to reading it. I know that others in, for example, I work with a CPP working group with PIA, and we've come to similar conclusions to yours. So it's really helpful in an educational sense to get this out. But I'm wondering, in the event that there is a referendum, how do you see the labor movement mobilizing greater support in opposition to it? So it's more than just having a report, but it's also getting people on the ground to work with each other and inform their fellow workers and neighbors to make something happen to defeat this crazy thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question, and I'm very happy to report that the leaders of our labor movement from both the public and private sector have met to discuss this issue. We had a president's retreat about a month and a half ago, just as the proposal was coming out from the government, and there was unanimous support for the labor movement making this one of our top priorities going forward. And so a couple of weeks after that president's meeting, I announced that we are going to launch a province-wide campaign, what we described as a Remain campaign, aimed at convincing our fellow Albertans to stay in the Canada Pension Plan. So our first goal is to start a conversation about what's at stake. But if we get to the point where there actually is a referendum campaign, we will register as what is described as a third-party advertiser on the election finance laws, and we will organize a Remain campaign. And so we're raising money for that right now, and we're putting the pieces in place for a province-wide campaign that's aimed not just at informing people, but also mobilizing them. So the report is just one step in the process. As I mentioned, we're launching a website today. There will be ads in the next week or so. And we will be building lists. We will be contacting supporters. And honestly, if we get to an official referendum campaign, we will be taking the people who we've identified on our list, many of whom are our members, but there's lots who are not. We have big lists, and we will mobilize those lists in the same way that we would during an election campaign to get people knocking on doors. We're already doing that. I mean, just to give you an indication, like we have campaign organizers, and over the last couple of weeks, we've been circulating petitions, and we've been offering our action kit. We have an action kit that has a petition, and just last week, we got like 1,200 requests for the action kit. Not 1,200 people signing the petition, 1,200 people asking for the action kit so they could take it out to the public to get them to sign. So, and we're just starting, right? Like, this was literally the first week of our effort. So Albertans are worried, they're anxious, and they're looking for an outlet for them to speak out and make a difference. And we in the labor movement are committed to providing them with that outlet and that platform.
Hi, thanks very much. I really appreciate this press conference and the opportunity to speak out. I have two things that I'd like to say. One's a comment, and I'm concerned about the ethics of not only our government, but the ethics of this whole process with the CPP. People are quibbling about the amount of money that we might get for this, but nobody's actually asking, just because we can withdraw, should we withdraw? Personally, I feel that we're Canadians first, and by withdrawing in the first place, we're putting all other Canadians in a really bad place, and it makes all of Alberta look greedy and awful, and I don't want to be placed in that position. So I think that that's really something bad. And in terms of the ethics, the government is also in a position right now where they're trying to get rid of the Conflict of Interest Act so that they can accept gifts of any size and sort, and that plays to what they think of ethics as well. So I have a big problem with that. My second question pertaining to this is, I'm a retiree. I collect a PSPP pension, which is provincial. APP, if it's set up, will be a provincial pension. So given that both of those might be under AIMCO, what happens to the PSPP pensions, the LAPP, and the ARTA pensions? I don't trust that AIMCO, who bungles what they do now and has a shady reputation, how will those things be mixed? Will we lose the PSPP and public sector pensions? Will they just disappear or get amalgamated? What's going to happen to that? We can't have two provincial pensions being run by the same corporation.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. Unfortunately, I can't provide you with a detailed answer, mostly because the government hasn't provided us the necessary information to make informed decisions, right? I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of this whole proposal. I mean, it seems hastily slapped together. They're just presenting their version of a best case scenario. They're not providing answers to obvious questions like the ones that you raised. In fact, they've suggested that they could get CPP to run the APP should it be established. And they made that suggestion without asking CPP. Subsequently, CPP has made it pretty clear that they would not be interested in doing that. Surprise, surprise. But you're right. You know, if CPP doesn't manage the APP, if we were to withdraw, the plan would probably be managed by AIMCO, which doesn't have the best reputation. As I mentioned in my formal remarks, their track record of investment returns is substantially lower than the track record of CPP, and to the tune of billions of dollars a year, right? And it wasn't that long ago that AIMCO lost literally billions of dollars by investing in a really risky market strategy, betting on the volatility of the market instead of actually investing money in something real. It was just like it was like slot machine or something, right? And so that's the group that we're being asked to trust with our retirement savings. You know, and that would be bad by itself, but they're asking us to leave, you know, investment manager with a really solid sterling reputation to go to this other investment manager with a really questionable reputation. So, you know, I wish I could give you a more specific answer, but like you know, they haven't been clear, and that's one of the big problems. They're asking people to make this big life-altering decision without full information. Yeah.
Hi, Gil. My name is Tom Fuller, and I work with Hans, who we heard from earlier, with Public Interest Alberta in a Canada Pension Plan Working Group. And we've been doing a lot of research and a lot of studying this proposal and come to the same conclusions that you guys have. Part of the trouble when you're discussing this proposal is knowing where to start and where to stop, because you could talk for hours about the flaws in this proposal, but by the time you did, everybody in the room would be asleep. One you just raised just now, which is who will invest this money? I mean, why would the CPPIB agree to do that? Sort of, we just picked your pocket, now help us count the money. And if AIMCO was called upon to do that, I suggest that their track record is not encouraging, nor does the fact that they would have to drastically upscale the size of their organization, and that kind of upscaling frequently includes risks. Even in the LifeWorks report, to be fair, they talk about who will be the plan administrator. That is, who will keep the records of how much people have paid in, what pension benefits they've accrued, and how much pension benefit they're owed when they finally retire. They suggest there are two possibilities, one trying to get the CPP to do it for them, and the other establishing a freestanding Alberta pension administrator. And they say that the cost there could range anywhere from $100 million to $1 billion. That's the kind of thing that never gets brought about. They take $1 billion to set up a brand new pension administrator that may or may not work properly. What then of the advantage of the APP? And there are a multitude of those kinds of questions that we don't have time to address today, but certainly the proposal from the provincial government doesn't address them properly either. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for raising the point about administrative costs. I agree with you. You could talk about. I purposely didn't. It's in our report. I purposely didn't mention today because there's so many other things. But one other thing, if we want to go down these different rabbit holes, we might actually have to set up a separate Alberta tax system in order for people, and they're not telling Albertans that in order to do this, we might actually have to fill out a separate tax form. That's what they do in Quebec. So how many people would like to do their taxes twice, right? You know, and that's probably one of the inevitable results of moving towards an Alberta pension plan. And the government has studiously avoided mentioning that because they understand that people would probably reject it out of hand. Taz.
Hi, Taz, Elder Taz. You know, you said snake oil. I call it snake oil medicine. I call it snakes in the grass. You know, Charlie Pride said the snakes crawl at night. He's saying that quite eloquently. and I find that things are going on behind closed doors that the public's not completely aware of. When you talk about when it's a referendum being spoken about, are they speaking specifically to the province, or is it going to be a national referendum? Because I wonder, have there been studies been done on how many workers have come from other provinces who contributed to the Canada pension? So when they say Alberta workers, are they including those workers who came from other provinces? Are they going by Alberta residents when they say Alberta workers? What exactly are they explaining and defining as an Alberta worker? Because have there been any studies done to how many workers from other provinces? I know there's numerous that come from the East Coast who worked in the oil pipeline industry. And I know there's numerous that came from Ontario, Quebec. I travel a lot throughout the country, and I speak to a lot of people, and I don't think a lot of people realize what's going on here in Alberta in regards to this CPP, and I'm not sure if they realize it would affect them in a different province. Would it be limited to Alberta residents, this APP that they're talking about, or would the people who live in different provinces have to apply to the Alberta government for a pension they paid into here when they worked?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really important question, and given that Alberta, probably more than any other province, has attracted people to work here on a temporary basis, mostly in the oil and gas sector, the question about whether or not people have worked here but have retired or moved elsewhere, whether they would have a say in this whole plan to pull Alberta out of CPP, that's a really important question. If you look at the government's own LifeWorks report, the authors of that report acknowledge that they have no idea how many people who have worked here and retired or moved elsewhere. They have no idea how many people would fall into that category. They say it's something that would have to be looked at for further research, but so they have no ideas on the numbers. They have no idea on the potential liability. The only thing that they make clear is that those people would not have a vote in the referendum. So it could potentially be tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of Canadians who will have at least a portion of their retirement income scooped up by the Alberta pension plan, and they would end up getting two checks, one from CPP, one from this standalone Alberta plan. But even though they would be affected, they've made it pretty clear that those people would not be given an opportunity to have a say in a referendum.
I think, is it on? I think if you sat down with someone from the East Coast, they would have no clue this is going on and how it affected their life. The baby boomers in the 1980s, there's a few of you here, you know that there was a big push to bring people to move to Alberta, to work in Alberta, and many of those people worked for years in Alberta and have returned to where they originally come from. So how are the, there's been no surveys done as to how many people came here who are not Albertans? Because I can remember walking around and getting a job and people say, where were you born? I'd say Alberta. And they'd be shocked because I rarely bumped across anybody who wasn't born here. So how is it that this government can say Alberta workers are the only people that they're going to talk to? Well, if those people came from a different province, are they an Alberta worker, or are they a Nova Scotian worker who come to work in Alberta? How are they defining this? I think that needs to be questioned, and those surveys need to be done before any kind of referendum happens, any type of vote happens in regards to this pension. I get a pension, and nobody's messing around with my pension.
Yeah. So maybe just two more questions.
Okay. What really angers me is they say we've paid more than anybody else, which is an out-and-out lie. You get a guide from whoever, and if you make this much money, this is what they take off your wages to pay. So we haven't paid more, and it's just an out-and-out lie. And I don't know how stupid they think we are, but very stupid, Yeah. They're lying to you.
Yeah, thank you, and it's basically, there's a set formula for determining the contribution rates, right? So every worker in Canada pays 5.9 5% of their income. That's matched by 5.9% from the employer up to a cap. And that formula applies to people working anywhere in the country, whether it's Ontario, Quebec, BC, or Alberta. It's exactly the same. And there's a cap. So like if you work under the cap, you might contribute a little less, but the formula is the same. All Canadians, regardless of where they live, pay the same, they get the same benefits. This notion that we're over-contributing is just a myth.
Hi. I guess I'm asking something where I'm sort of asking you to speculate a bit. Like, my question is, what's wrong with these people? You've laid out what's obviously wrong with the numbers. What's obviously wrong with this if we pretended it was a real and practical proposal. So I'm kind of wondering, what your take is on why are they doing this? What's the underlying motive for having this kind of a ludicrous, absurd, unworkable campaign?
Yeah, that's probably a really good question to wrap things up on. And the short answer is we don't know. They haven't made that clear. I mean, they're trying to say that the rationale for pulling Alberta workers and retirees out of the Canada Pension Plan is because we've been over-contributing for years, and that if we set up our own plan, we could save money. But as we've just been talking about, and as is clearly laid out on a report, that's a myth. Like, Albertans are not over-contributing, and we're not being poorly treated. So if that's not true, what is their real motive? So we have a secret agenda problem here, right? And so we can speculate, and I alluded in my remarks to a couple of potential real rationales, right? Like, the Premier herself has mused about getting her hands on retirement savings and using it to fund some kind of economic agenda. And she's been pretty clear that economic agenda would involve using the retirement savings of Albertans to support oil and gas companies who are having increasing problems getting investment cash from global capital markets. But I think we, as Albertans, we should ask ourselves, if those companies are having a hard time getting investment, are they really good investments, right? And is that the way you want to see your retirement savings spent, right? But is that actually the agenda? Perhaps there's evidence to suggest that is their real agenda, but they haven't said it explicitly, and that's the problem. I mean, like they should not expect Albertans to get behind a proposal when we don't actually understand the real motivation behind that proposal. It's too much to ask, especially when we're talking about something as important as our retirement savings. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap up there, but thank you very much for joining us. It's been, and keep it, if you haven't already signed up, please sign up, and we'll keep you informed on all the work that we're doing to help protect our Canada Pension Plan here in Alberta. Thanks, everyone.